Hello, I am Uma Kanjiwal, Professor and Head, Faculty of Library and Information Science from IGNOU. In this session, I will be taking up management of digital libraries. Now, when we talk about management of digital libraries, basically we are talking about actually managing projects where major digital libraries or digital repositories are being initiated. So once we go about planning for that, what we need to understand is why we are digitizing. And as we know that it is for the better access and making resources available, adding value to the resources so that more and more users can use it and extend to the last mile, preserve fragile materials, that is another important aspect, support educational and research activities, and fulfill strategic mission and goals of the institution. Now, once we are planning to go in for a project, what we need to understand is what is the project about, who are going to be our audiences, and we need to identify our primary audience and the secondary audience. We need to decide on what is to be digitized, because we cannot go about digitizing everything. So whatever is of maximum value, that needs to be considered for digitization. Options are there also where we may have to think in terms of retroconversion, and then fix our priorities, which is to be taken up first and which comes later. And one has to decide also who will be taking up the decision on these priorities. Another important thing is when do we start the project, and that also will depend a lot on different factors like the rise in information explosion, the different constraints like manpower and monetary constraints that are there, and evolving a concept of resource sharing and networking could be another way out where we can actually collaboratively go about. So once we think of starting a project, first thing is to decide about the vision and mission of the project. For this, we need to understand the development goal, that is what is going to be the long-term benefit, what are our immediate objectives, what will be achieved at the end of the project, and who are going to be the beneficiaries. So before embarking on the project, what is need to be done is the need assessment. So we need to see what are the existing policies and practices that are being followed. If any changes are there, that needs to be considered. And also in terms of this needs to be considered in terms of the preservation and access policies that have to be built in. Also, we need to identify if there are any shortcomings and how to overcome them. Then the project output has to be decided as to how it intends to meet the objectives of the institution, or the what kind of services and products that we are planning to develop. So we have to, I was talking about, that management relates to a project that we are taking up for a digital library initiative. So the steps that needs to be identified, and that depends a lot on what kind of project we are embarking on. But if you look into the general things that need to be built up, is within the processes are, first think in terms of computer literacy to the general users who are there. So they have to be training of those persons who will be involved, the personnel who will be involved in digitizing processes. The next step is converting the analog material into digital form, and whatever is available in digital form already needs to be collated. And then we need to think in terms of the next step will be what kind of cataloging procedures to be followed, what metadata is to be followed, how we are going to index our material, and then finally for dissemination, what kind of platform we are going to use, and the web designing and publishing issues that needs to be considered. And wherever there are copyright issues, we have to negotiate with the copyright holders. So these are the basic steps that needs to be followed in while setting up a digital library. Now, talking about management, one important aspect is managing the personnel. So first thing, one needs to identify what are the job requirements, what are going to be the skills that are to be required, and how we train our people so that they can take up the task. Then each person has to be allocated responsibilities of developing, digitizing the content. And finally comes the actual implementation, and also for that we have to delegate authority to different personnel. Now, if we look into any digital library project, there are 4 basic pillars or components of that needs to be considered, especially from the management perspective. One is the application part, where we talk about the processes that has to be followed, digitization processes, managing multimedia content, rights management, etc. Then we have to talk about the technological issues, like how we make the services available 24/7, the scale of growth that we will be thinking in terms of long-term planning, and integrating with the institutional system, like already some existing repositories or other resource bases are there, how we integrate with that. That is another important thing. From the content side, we need to identify what kind of resources we are going to digitize and make accessible. And in that case, it could be open access material, it could be licensed material. So those things have to be identified, and they have to be integrated with a digital library platform. And finally, when we talk about the platform, it is we have to talk about the hardware, software, the storage procedures, the operating systems, the environment in which the digital library is to be built, the applications that are required. We can think in terms of having open source content management systems. Now, another important thing is when we are embarking on in a digital library project, the decision on the time frame. And in fact, the best way is to go in for network analysis. PERT CPM charts can be used for these purposes. We can decide the beginning date, end date, duration of activities. What are how the activities are linked with each other? This needs to be considered. And also, one has to see that it should not take much time. We should not spend much time on the pilot project or the conceptualization phase. Rather, focus should be more on the main phase. Then also we need to consider the average lifespan of hardware that are used, because generally if it is a long-term project, then we have to think in terms of the maintenance of hardware that will be there. And finally, one also has to see that it should be, like in a year, generally it is calculated that around 20,000 pages per year can be realistic calculations for digitization process. So accordingly, we have to decide the time frame of our project. Basically, if we look into the digital library project workflow, we have 3 stages: the pre-production, the production, and the final post-production stages. So what goes into it is the like in the pre-production, it is the planning stage where we have to think of the project management and inventory control, storage, etc. Those aspects need to be looked into. In the production, it is actually the steps that I earlier mentioned, the activities that have to be carried out in the process, right from formatting, collation, metadata creation, and finally dissemination. And in the post-production, it is taking user feedback, evaluation studies, so that we can go about it. So in the concluding remarks, I would like to say that digitization is a complete process, and it includes a lot of activities, right from selection, assessment, prioritization, etc., and finally to the assessment and evaluation of the digitization process, as you saw in the lifespan that I showed in the earlier slide. So in fact, when we talk about management of digital libraries, these aspects need to be considered seriously, and properly planning has to be done from the aspects of budgeting, costing, and finally implementing the project. So with this, we come to the end of this session. Thank you.